Your daughter tried to shoot you? Yeah. Shooting at me. She killed her mom. When I do that, she tried to kill me. What's her name? Carly Gregg.
She sits in a Mississippi courtroom with a faint little smile, so quiet and stubborn it looks completely out of place on someone waiting for a verdict. It's not a happy smile. It's not relief. It's the kind of expression you see on a person who has convinced themselves the worst thing won't happen to them. The verdict is supposed to decide whether she could spend the rest of her life behind bars, but her calm doesn't look like strength. It looks like certainty, like the ending is already written and the court is just finishing the scene. There's no visible tension in her posture. Her shoulders aren't raised, her back is straight. Her hands sit still and neat, not like someone trying to stop themselves from shaking, but like someone who doesn't even need to try. Her eyes drift around the room, landing on people, tables, her attorney's movements, like she's watching routine, not danger. It's the way teenagers look around a classroom when they're just trying to sit through the period and wait for the bell. Except there is no bell here. Every word carries weight. You can't joke away and you can't undo with a quick sorry. This is a murder case, and this day can do more than ruin a future. It can lock it in place permanently. Carly Gregg has talked herself into believing the jury will buy her story. The defense has spent a long time building one specific picture. Not just a troubled teenager, but a sick child. A girl whose mind supposedly broke at the worst possible moment. The argument is simple on paper. She lost control. She wasn't directing her own actions. She didn't understand consequences, and that means she shouldn't be held to the same responsibility as an adult who acted deliberately, calmly, and with full awareness. Her lawyers talk about a mental break, about voices, about a girl who didn't understand what she was doing. And for a while, that line can sound believable, not only because it can be presented smoothly, but because people in that room don't want to accept one hard truth. A 14-year-old can cross a line this far. Even experienced adults sometimes search for an explanation that makes reality feel less terrifying. Because if it's illness, it feels like an exception. If it's choice, then the fear hits differently. The jury listens closely. The courtroom gets so quiet you notice tiny sounds, papers shifting, a chair giving a soft squeak, someone swallowing. And inside that silence hangs a question nobody says out loud, but everyone feels. Can a 14-year-old plan something like this with a clear head? And right behind it, an even more uncomfortable question. Are the adults in this room trying too hard to turn this into a simple formula, just so it fits in the mind without breaking it? Honestly, this makes me sick. Look, we were all teenagers once. We all had meltdowns. But planning a murder like it is a grocery list? That is not a mental break. That is pure evil. For a moment, it can seem like the case might tilt in a direction the prosecution doesn't want. Because in trials like this, doubt can speak louder than facts if the facts are presented in a way that leaves a crack, even a small one, for what if, for maybe it wasn't like that, for a version that feels easier to live with. And then something happens that changes the tone completely. You can almost feel the shift. Like someone turns off warm lighting that softens faces and blurs details and flips on harsh, cold light where words don't hide you anymore. In that moment, it's clear the jury is about to see something that's hard to reframe.
What's your name? Okay, calm down for me. Give me your name again. Heath Smiley. Heath Smiley? Yes, sir. All right, mister, what's your phone number you calling me from? Did she hit you? Yeah, I got hit in the neck a little bit. Okay, so she grazed your neck? Yes, sir. All right, and what's her name? Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg? Does she still have a gun on her? I took it from her. She ran. You took it from her and she ran? Yes, sir. She was screaming something at me. I couldn't understand. I locked the door. She's outside. I don't know what's going on. Which way did she run off to? She ran into the backyard. It went over a fence. Ran into the backyard and went over your fence. Yeah. What is she wearing? T-shirt, gray shirt and jeans. Gray shirt and jeans? About how tall is she? 5'2". About 5'2"? What color hair? Brownish, short hair. Back door, she opened fire on me. And was just screaming. Okay, just calm down for me. We got everybody headed. She what? She killed her mom. She killed her mom? Yeah, that's what I'm screaming about. Where's the mom? When I do this, she's going to kill me. Where's the mom?
Guys, thanks for hanging out. I promise not to waste a second of your day. Before we dive in, if you have a sec, drop where you're watching from in the comments. Honestly, it blows my mind seeing people tune in from all over the world. Listen, the goal here is simple. I want to make the absolute best content for you. If I earn it, hit that subscribe button, but if I don't, tell me why. Seriously, roast me if you have to. I just want to get better. Sorry for holding you up. Let's start. After that, the atmosphere snaps into a different shape. The jury isn't dealing with interpretation anymore. They're dealing with pieces of reality that don't fit neatly into the accidental break narrative. And that is the defense's nightmare. Because once there's material you can't stretch with speech and you can't cover with emotion, people stop weighing versions and start trusting their own sense of cause and effect. They watch, they remember, they compare, and they build their conclusion not because someone told them what to think, but because they saw it. Carly stays in her seat, but something changes in her eyes, a quick, sharp kind of recognition that's hard to mistake for anything else. It's the moment she realizes the story she's been holding on to, the one her attorneys have been feeding life into, is starting to die in front of the jury. And if she believed 5 minutes ago that this might end soft, that belief starts slipping. Not today, not anytime soon. And maybe the word home won't mean an address anymore. Maybe home becomes an institution, a facility, a locked routine, a place where time doesn't move like it does for everyone else. To understand how this ends up in a courtroom, you have to go back to a family life that looked ordinary from the outside. Those are the cases that shake people the most, because right up until the last moment, it feels like there's no space for catastrophe here. Carly Gregg was 14 years old. She did well in school. People described her as smart, capable, the kind of student who could be counted on. Her mother, Ashley Smiley, taught math at the same school Carly attended, and that created a sense of control. Mom is close, mom sees the environment, mom can notice danger before it becomes real. To many people, that seems like the perfect setup. Ashley knew the teachers, she knew the hallways, the routines, the social circles. She was the kind of parent who didn't just let things drift. She stayed present, she asked questions, she watched for changes, she tried to keep a connection even when her daughter started closing off. From the outside, it looked like a steady, normal home. But inside, small cracks were forming. Not loud screaming matches, not the kind of chaos that makes neighbors call the police. Just slow changes that can be brushed off as teenage stuff. Doors closing more often, longer pauses before answers, short replies like, fine, whatever, leave me alone. A growing refusal to explain where she'd been or who she was with. Carly pulled away. She got more private. And it wasn't only mood. It was the way she started building an invisible wall around herself. Her sleep got worse. Her emotions swung hard. She kept more and more inside, even from people she used to trust. and a strange feeling crept into the house. Ashley saw her daughter every day, but she didn't always know what was happening behind Carly's eyes. Over time, it became clear Carly had been living a double life and not the harmless kind of teen secrecy. This was the type of secrecy adults recognize as risk. Hidden phones, forbidden habits, conversations, and messages nobody at home knew existed. She used extra phones, kept out of sight. She was involved with substances she wasn't supposed to be around. She communicated with people Ashley didn't know. To Ashley, that wasn't just bad behavior. It was a sign her child was drifting into a place where parental control disappears fast. This is every parent's absolute nightmare. You feed them, you clothe them, you love them, and then you realize you are sleeping down the hall from a stranger who secretly wants you dead. As those details surfaced, Ashley didn't treat it like betrayal. She treated it like a warning sign. She believed her daughter needed help, not just punishment. She reached out to professionals, hoping to stabilize things before they spiraled. Because a lot of parents believe that if you intervene early enough, you can pull a teenager back towards safety. In the days leading up to the tragedy, the tension in the home grew heavier. Outside, life still looked normal: school, routines, a house on a quiet street. But inside, there was pressure building. And nobody saw it as potentially deadly, because family conflict can feel normal until something happens that changes what normal even means. That morning, Carly went to school with her mother like usual. On the surface, it looked like another regular day that would end with a ride home and a conversation about homework and evening plans. But at school, a moment happened that would become the first domino. Sometimes friends see what adults don't. One of Carly's friends, worried about her behavior, chose to tell Ashley what Carly was hiding. The friend likely thought they were helping, and maybe in a different story, that's exactly what it would have been. But in this one, it chills me to the bone thinking about this friend. They thought they were doing the right thing, saving her. But in reality, that one conversation signed a death warrant, that it was the trigger. It put information in Ashley's hands that made it impossible to pretend nothing was going on. Ashley learned things she didn't know. She didn't create a scene. She didn't blow up publicly. She made a decision to talk at home and sort through it. And honestly, that decision sounds normal. It sounds like what most parents would do. After school, they drove home together. That ride, usually just a routine part of their day, turned into a quiet pause before everything changed. Ashley is likely running through the conversation she hasn't had yet. And a teenager, in that same silence, can be running through a completely different plan that nobody else can see. No one could imagine that within hours, that house would become a crime scene, and an ordinary parent-teen conflict would turn into something the entire country would talk about. That unpredictability is what haunts cases like this. It follows everyone involved, from neighbors to investigators to the jury. When they got home, nothing on the outside signaled what was coming. Movements were normal. Habits were automatic. It looked like 100 other after-school returns. Mom comes in thinking about dinner and a serious talk. The kid does routine things, acting like it's just another day. Carly stepped into the yard and let the dogs out, a simple, automatic task. Ashley went inside, carrying the weight of what she'd just learned, and headed to Carly's room to check what the friend had told her. In her mind, it wasn't about humiliating her daughter. It was about understanding how serious this was. There wasn't yelling. There wasn't a dramatic argument. There wasn't a moment you can point to and say, that's when everything snapped. And later, that absence matters. Because what happened next didn't look like an impulsive reaction to a screaming fight. It looked like something that started in quiet, without obvious provocation. Carly stayed outside a few more minutes, while her mother was alone in her room with the very things Carly had been hiding. That pause, those few minutes of silence, would become important in the way people later tried to understand the sequence. Because sometimes it only takes a few minutes for the future to split into two roads: a hard conversation or a disaster. When Carly came back inside, she moved slowly and with control. No obvious panic, no frantic confusion. And instead of going to her room or the kitchen, she changed direction and walked toward the parents' bedroom. Later, this route would be examined because it didn't look accidental. It didn't look like instinct. It looked like a choice. In that bedroom, she retrieved a firearm that was kept under a mattress, and from that second on, the chain of events moved into a place where every alternative became less likely. Let's be real for a second. A mental break is screaming, crying, chaos, walking calmly to get a gun. That is not insanity. That is an executioner clocking in for work.
She ran into the backyard. I tried to follow her. She jumped the fence and ran. She shot me in the neck. It's okay. Does she still have the gun? It's on the kitchen counter. I think there's one live round left in it. I opened the cylinder. I went in the back door. She tried to shoot me. I need some gloves. What's her name? Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg? How old is she? 14. She'll be 15 next month. Okay.
After that, every step she takes in the house carries a different meaning. Not the scattered movements of a teen acting without thought, but a sequence of actions that suggests she understood what she was doing in the moment. Moving back through the hallway, she kept the firearm positioned so it wasn't visible from a distance, not displayed, not waved around, not used to scare. And she paused, just briefly, to confirm her mother was still in Carly's room, right here. This is the moment I lose all sympathy. You only hide a weapon behind your back if you know exactly what you are doing, and you know exactly how wrong it is. That pause later becomes more than a small detail. In court, details like that turn into markers of awareness, because someone who is completely checked out doesn't stop to verify circumstances. They don't pause to make sure the situation hasn't changed. But here, there was verification. There was assessment. There was a moment that suggested she understood where her mother was, what the next step would be, and what that meant. Shots were fired in a space that minutes earlier was just a child's bedroom, a room with notebooks, everyday clutter, the normal mess of teenage life. After that, the house fell into silence. Not peaceful silence. Not relief. The kind of silence that comes after something irreversible. And that silence becomes a theme later. Silence between actions, silence between explanations, silence that sits behind every excuse. What happened in those minutes would later be analyzed second by second. Even without graphic detail, one thing is clear. It happened fast, without outside witnesses, leaving Carly alone with what she had just done. And in cases like this, what someone does after the act often tells the jury more about mental state than what they say months later. Minutes passed. During that time, she did not call for help. She did not run to a neighbor. She did not act like a child desperately searching for an adult to fix a crisis. Instead, she went to the kitchen. A camera captured her movements, calm, controlled, not frantic. That calm would later sound loud in court because it clashed so sharply with what had just happened. Then she took her mother's phone and began sending messages. She used familiar wording, the kind of phrases her mother would normally use to create the illusion that everything was still normal. And that becomes a key piece for the prosecution, because it doesn't look like panic, it looks like management, like she was already thinking about what the story would look like to other people. I don't know about you, but this makes me physically ill. Stepping over your own mother's fresh body just to send a text message, that isn't mental illness. That is a complete lack of a soul.
That's mom. Yeah. No, mom and dad both got it.
Mom and dad both what?
Got hit.
Okay. And
Dad's got it through in the shoulder. He's already in the ambulance.
So it's the 14-year-old?
Yeah, the 14-year-old.
Where is that?
No.
Yeah, I found that out way
Later, when Carly's stepfather came home, he had no idea the message he received didn't come from his wife. That deception would shape what happened next. He walked into the house not on guard, not prepared for danger, but like someone expecting an ordinary evening. He opened the door, expecting a familiar scene, and ran straight into chaos that unfolded in seconds. The shift from normal home to danger was so fast his mind barely had time to catch up. Injury, shock, confusion. A moment where the place that should feel safest suddenly becomes the place you have to survive. His testimony would become one of the heaviest parts of the trial. He described how quickly everything happened, how little time there was to understand what he was seeing, and how he managed to wrestle control of the weapon and get out, saving his own life. Those details matter not because they add drama, but because they establish sequence, timing, and reality. He didn't speak with theatrical emotion, no performance, no exaggerated anger, and that restraint made it hit harder, because sometimes the flattest voice carries the most weight, the voice of someone whose inside world already flipped over long ago. That silence breaks my heart more than screaming ever could. That is the face of a man who has seen hell and knows he can never go back to the life he had.
Alright, sweetie. Look. Let me step out real quick for me. Alright. Hey, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move them around to the front of you, okay? I'm gonna move the handcuffs around to the front of you. Okay. Alright. Alright, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna swab your hands, okay? Right. Now, we'll ask you a bunch of questions, but obviously you fired with a pistol, correct? Okay.
Alright, look. I need you to hold your hand out like this. I'm gonna do your right hand first, okay? That's your right hand. Keep it right like that.
Swab up here.
What is this?
It's a GSR. It shows which hand did you shoot with?
Okay.
Which hand did you shoot with? Alright, I'm gonna go up. Flop the hand, turn the hand over.
Turn it over.
And rub on the outside part around the knuckles.
Where do you want hits from? I guess you can put it in my vehicle with my key. The key fob is in my left pocket.
Alright, now so go ahead and take. Alright.
Is my stepdad okay?
I don't know, baby. I can't talk to you about
Oh,
this.
here, I'm just...
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
After that, control fully shifts to law enforcement. The area around the home fills with sirens, commands, fast movement, the coordinated work of a system. One officer gathers initial information. Another locks down the scene. Another tries to locate the suspect and determine whether anyone nearby is at risk. By then, Carly is no longer inside the home. Searches expand into nearby streets and yards, and inside the house, investigators begin the methodical work that later becomes the backbone of the prosecution. The home stops being a home, it becomes a scene. Every object matters. Every small detail is recorded. As police work through the house, the picture becomes harder to fit into the defense's narrative of a sudden, uncontrollable break. Because in addition to what happened, there are actions before and after, and those actions live in time, in choices, in steps that can be traced. In Carly's room, investigators find Ashley. At that point, the system is operating on facts, not emotion. Timelines, locations, patterns, physical indicators, what appears to have happened after. And one thing becomes clear: early there was time between the act and the call for help. And in that time, things were done that didn't look like blind panic. For the prosecution, that time gap becomes a marker.
Here because on March the 19th, 2024, Carly rode to school with her mother that day. Ashley was a school teacher at Northwest Rankin, taught geometry. Carly was in the 10th grade. You'll hear that morning she got in a little altercation with one of her friends, cussed him out. But what you'll hear, ladies and gentlemen, from the testimony of this friend is that he was so worried about Carly's use of smoking marijuana, and so worried about her being high, and so worried about her having these burner phones that her mom didn't know about, that he felt compelled to tell Miss Ashley Smiley that day. Ladies and gentlemen, after the incident with Carly that morning, you'll hear that he gets in touch with another friend, and he's like, hey, you got to keep her distracted so I can go tell Miss Smiley what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, this friend cared about Carly. He was like, I gotta intervene. I gotta tell her. I'm afraid of what's happening. You'll hear from him that he did in fact tell Miss Smiley. That after 4th block that day, he goes and he tells Miss Smiley, hey, Carly has got these vapes. She's got this phone. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear then that Carly Gregg rides in the car home with her mother from school to their house. They leave school sometime after 3:30. They get home a little before 4. You'll hear that when they get inside the house, it's only their 2 dogs, Ashley Smiley and Carly Gregg. Immediately, Carly goes and lets the dogs out. You'll hear testimony that Ashley then goes into Carly's room. You'll hear that while Ashley is in her room, that Carly's still outside. At some point, Ashley finds what law enforcement believe to be the 4 boxes that contain vape pens. Testimony will be that we believe she carried them from Carly's room to her bedroom, went back to search in Carly's room. The evidence will show that almost immediately upon Carly coming inside the house, that she walks straight to her parents' bedroom, that she goes straight to her mom's side of the bed and removes a .357 Magnum from under the mattress. We believe the testimony will be that then she concealed that .357 Magnum behind her back. As she walked through the kitchen, she peeks her head around. We believe the testimony will show that she peeks her head around the kitchen to make sure that her mom hasn't come out of her bedroom. We believe the evidence will then show that she walked with that .357 Magnum behind her back, walked in to her own bedroom, and then fired 3 shots into her mother, killing her.
When medical responders arrive, they can only confirm what occurred earlier. In that moment, the event fully becomes a criminal case with a clear legal framework. From here forward, nothing is maybe. Every action is documented. Every statement can end up in evidence. Meanwhile, the search for Carly continues. Tension rises because officers are looking for an armed teenager who has already caused serious harm and could pose a danger to anyone she encounters. In searches like that, there is no room for mistakes. It's about seconds, risk, and responsibility. She is found not far from the house. She doesn't fight. She follows commands. She answers questions. Her state is difficult to label as pure confusion or clear remorse. And that creates another uncomfortable question for the court. What does this kind of composure mean at 14? And what does it say about awareness?
We believe the evidence will show that there were 3 victims on March 19th. Ashley Smiley, Heath Smiley, and Carly Smiley. And Carly Gregg. That they were all 3 victims. We believe the evidence will show that Carly had been suffering from a mental illness, that Carly was not aware on March 19th that she had a mental illness. We believe the evidence will show that Carly's parents, who lived with her, were not aware that Carly was suffering from a mental illness. We believe the evidence will show that Carly's close friends, who saw her at school every day, were not aware that Carly was suffering from a mental illness, because it's hard to look at a person and understand that they have a mental illness. It's hard to look at a person and know that they have a mental illness. That's why it's often referred to as the invisible disease. A person can exhibit symptoms of a mental illness without people necessarily knowing that they have one, or other people necessarily knowing that's what another person has. While the events on March 19th were tragic, the events on March 19th were not intentional. The evidence will show, and the testimony will show, that Carly Gregg loved her mother. That Carly Gregg and her mother had a loving, close relationship. Carly Gregg's mom loved her. In fact, her life revolved around Carly, as parents' lives often do revolve around their children. Carly very much wanted to please her mother. Carly was an exceptional student, made a 30 on the ACT when she was 13 years old. She was the apple of her mother and her stepfather's eye. And you will understand by the conclusion of this hearing why Carly's stepfather is still supporting her and standing behind her. Because he knows on March 19th, there were 3 victims.
After her detention, Carly is placed in a patrol vehicle. The process is standard, and in cases like this, standard procedure matters because it captures behavior in real time. Movements are recorded, words are logged, reactions are watched as potential pieces of the larger picture. There is no screaming chaos here, no wild disorientation. She responds, she listens, she follows directions. At one point, she asks about her stepfather's condition. Those questions become a point of argument later. The defense points to them as evidence of emotional connection, a sign of a normal reaction, a child aware she hurt someone close to her. The prosecution points to something else. Words of concern do not automatically erase controlled decisions. Sometimes care and speech can exist beside cold choices in action. And the court is left deciding what those questions really mean. Don't let that fool you. She isn't asking because she cares. She is asking to see if she needs to finish the job, or am I being too harsh?
Okay, just calm down for me. We got everybody headed. She what? She killed her mom. She killed her mom? Yeah, that's what I'm screaming about. Where's the mom? When I do that, she got to kill me. Where's the mom?
That same night, the home is sealed off completely. Police tape, bright lights, equipment, officers moving through rooms with gloves and cameras. Any sense of family space is gone. Inside, investigators begin the slow work of gathering evidence. Surveillance footage, messages, call logs, digital traces, physical indicators. This is the phase where the story stops being emotional narrative and becomes verified fact. A timeline forms, not vague, not stitched together from memory alone, but detailed, with pauses, actions, and time windows. Data from different sources begins to match up. The pieces start locking together, and that's what the prosecution later calls an unbreakable chain. Over the next days, the tragedy becomes public. Carly Gregg's name appears in the news. People react with sharp, divided emotion. Society splits between 2 instincts: protect a child and protect justice. To some, Carly is a sick girl who needed treatment and support, a teenager in crisis who fell through cracks. To others, she is a person who committed a serious crime and must be held accountable regardless of age. And both sides claim their view is the more humane one. When the case reaches court, the central question isn't what happened. The basic event is not where the fight is. The fight is why, and in what state of mind. Did Carly understand what she was doing? Did she understand cause and effect? Could she control her behavior? The trial becomes a collision between 2 versions: mental break versus deliberate choice.
And you state in your last session with me, she appeared emotionally stable and she had no or homicidal feelings suspected by me nor spoken by her. So I want to ask you about that. You said that she didn't tell you about any feelings, but you didn't think that there was anything like that going on either.
No, that's correct.
And then you also noted that she did not indicate that our week was negatively affecting her.
Correct.
What did you mean by that?
Well, anytime that a person's prescription meds change, you need them to be very concerned about side effects, feelings of things of that sort. And so I wanted to follow up and make sure she wasn't experiencing negative reactions regarding that.
You also said that, nor did she appear different from any other sessions, nor emotionally unstable or dysregulated. Can you talk about what that means?
Yes, just kind of basically what we said, that was on the first part of each of my sessions. Like, she seemed very oriented to time and space and didn't seem to have erratic speech, loud speech, to be overly angry or overly happy, a normal situation observance of her.
And then you go on to say she did not appear melancholy nor zoned out emotionally. Can you talk about what you meant there?
Yeah, she had reported several times that, at least one time maybe, but I feel like I maybe wrote it more than once, I'm not sure, that with some of the Zoloft, she felt like a zombie. And so, you know, she never really appeared that way to me ever, but she had reported it, so I put it in my notes when that had occurred. But I was saying here that I didn't notice any of it as well.
And you talked about how you had gone through conflict management with Carly on the day before the incident.
Correct.
I think you also talked about kind of what you observed between Carly and Ashley's relationship. Can you talk about why you thought that was important to put in your record?
Yes, sure. Well, ordinarily, termination of care is in a very different manner, and I knew that this one was a very sad act that occurred, and I wanted to be clear that I did not ever observe them together other than in the waiting room, and I never really saw, you know, anything that would allude me to believe that, you know, or hint at any kind of very severe danger or threat.
At any point during your treatment and sessions with Carly, did you think that she was being physically abused by anyone?
No, never. In fact, I asked several times about the stepdad, and I'm very confident in her response, verbally and non-verbally, that it felt very much to me like that nobody that she was living with had been abusing her. Now, her biological father, yes.
And she described some incidents where he had been physical with Ashley as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then what about, I mean, I didn't see any note of this, but did she at any point ever report that she had been by anyone?
No, she told me she had not.
Court's indulgence. No further questions, Your Honor.
Opening statements lay out two competing realities built from the same facts. It's not always that someone is obviously lying. It's that each side chooses what to spotlight and what to keep in shadow. For the defense, the facts are signs of illness. For the prosecution, the same facts are signs of intent. The jury's job isn't just to listen, it's to build a complete moral and legal picture in their minds. The trial moves slowly and methodically because everyone understands what's at stake. A decision that will define the life of someone who is still a minor but facing consequences tied to an adult-level act. Prosecutors walk the jury through the day, step by step, back to the morning. The school, the friend's report to Ashley, the ride home, the sequence of choices. They present it not as random chaos, but as a path of decisions. The defense insists that what looks logical from the outside can still come from a mind in crisis, a mind unable to evaluate consequences the way a stable person would. Witnesses who knew Carly before that day are brought in because the jury needs context beyond evidence, photos, and recorded clips. People describe her as capable, responsible, eager for approval, deeply affected by her mother's expectations. That image clashes with what the evidence suggests: more quiet control than emotional explosion, more sequence than randomness. And inside that clash, the jury is forced to decide what kind of truth they believe they're looking at.
How much did Ashley love Carly?
They loved each other so much. She just, everything she did, she planned out for Carly and around Carly.
Tell us about yours and Carly's relationship before March 19, 2024.
We were always good. We laughed and played and messed around, loved video games, and took her to karate stuff until she kind of got tired of that, and she started going to guitar practice weekly, so I was taking her to that every week. We got along great.
You liked being a stepdad?
Yes.
Sometimes with children comes discipline, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say, or how would you describe the type of parent that Ashley was to Carly?
She was, like I said, always thinking about Carly and just Carly's first no matter what. She would do anything in the world for her. And would try to get the best for her every day.
Were there times that you and Ashley would have to punish Carly?
Of course.
Give us some examples of that, Heath.
She had troubles growing up with back and forth with the stepdad and everything, so she would always wanting to try to make friends at the house and around home.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen exactly what you remember about when you came home on March the 19th, 2024.
Everything seemed pretty normal, and came on in, and when I opened the door to the kitchen there, gun went off in my face before the door was, 3 or 4 inches wide open. And everything kind of went pretty fast from there. It was a blur, gun flash in my face, and then it went off 2 more times, but my hand was on the gun after the first shot, and I twisted it from her.
Who was pointing that gun at you?
It was Carly.
Who pulled the trigger when you opened the door?
The first one I know was Carly. After that, my hand was on the gun too, and I know I had a scratch on my thumb and all. I very well could have hit it, I know, that third time.
Did you ever get struck by a bullet?
Yes, one of them kind of grazed right through this muscle up here.
When Carly's stepfather takes the stand, the room goes still. He isn't just a witness. He is a direct victim who survived. And what complicates the emotional landscape is that he doesn't arrive filled with performative hatred. He doesn't try to flood the jury with anger. His voice is controlled, measured, almost clinical at times. He describes coming home, those first seconds before his brain recognized danger. He describes how fast it unfolded, how reality cracked open in a blink. He describes being injured, disoriented, forced to react instinctively to stay alive. There's no obvious push to make it worse for Carly. There is only a need to put what happened on the record as accurately as he can. That lack of dramatic emotion makes his testimony heavier, because the jury doesn't hear someone trying to manipulate their feelings. They hear someone still trying to understand how this could happen inside his own home. And the defense knows every detail like this makes the argument of total loss of control harder to hold.
Checked our bedroom, bathroom, closet, other side of the bed, under the desk in there, and turned and started going towards the other end of the house, and I glanced in our spare little third bedroom, and then turned and went into Carly's room, and that's where I found Ashley.
When you found Ashley, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen what you saw?
She was laying on her back and had her hands kind of across her, and a towel over her face.
From there, the court turns to Carly's mental health in the period leading up to the incident. This is where the two sides diverge most sharply, because mental state can't be set on a table as a physical object. It has to be argued through evaluations, records, expert opinions, and testimony, and every word leaves room for interpretation. The defense brings in experts who talk about depression, anxiety, sleep problems, possible hallucinations, and the impact of medication. They describe an inner world that was unstable, fragmented, slipping out of balance. The prosecution pushes back with a different point. People who interacted with Carly regularly before the event, teachers, peers, and professionals, did not document signs of psychosis or a complete loss of contact with reality. And the core argument keeps returning: planning, checking circumstances, concealing actions. because a person who truly doesn't understand what they're doing rarely tries to control how it looks to others.
Was flat, that she was zombie, that she was still quite depressed, she was still cutting. She also reported that the voices were getting worse, that they were becoming more urgent, more prominent, and she was beginning to worry that they were taking over for her. Now, she told me that the only thing the voices said to her were things that were kind of elitist, like you're better than those people. Like that's the only thing she told me they said. So her mood is poor, the voices are getting worse, her sleep continues to be bad, and she's smoking marijuana on 2 or 3 times a week. She also reported that she had a fair amount of anxiety during this time as well.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Dr. Clark, when did you first receive the vital core records?
So I received the vital core records, or the records from the Rankin County Correctional Facility for her psychiatric treatment and medication. And I didn't receive them until I had already interviewed Carly.
Carly's personal writings become another major battleground. The prosecution sees them as evidence of fixed ideas and possible intent. The defense frames them as a cry for help, chaotic language from a teenager trying to process pain in the only way she knows how. For the jury, it's one of the hardest parts. It forces them to balance human empathy for mental suffering with the obligation to judge evidence without letting emotion take over. The law doesn't forbid compassion, but it does demand a conclusion about responsibility. As the trial approaches its final stage, the tension in the room becomes almost physical. Everyone understands the decision will be final, and it will shape Carly's life in a way that can't be undone. Closing arguments take different tones, but both sides speak to the jury's responsibility to the law, to the community, and to their own conscience.
Auditory hallucinations or hearing voices are typically what someone with bipolar II disorder is going to be experiencing?
No. The short answer is no. It's not usual for someone with bipolar II disorder to hear voices. Sometimes people that get very depressed, can experience auditory hallucinations, hear voices along with that. People that are manic can absolutely experience auditory hallucinations. They can become very psychotic, but otherwise it's really not at all common.
And based on what you reviewed in preparing for your evaluation of Carly, were there any indications in any documents where Carly had reported hearing voices prior to March 19th?
Yes.
Okay. Where?
So the document in particular was her journal entry from March 12th of 2024, and 1 week before the incident.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
We put Carly's journal into evidence. I'll just hand you that copy of it. Now, you mentioned a journal entry from March 12th?
Correct.
Okay. And is that the journal entry that I've handed you there?
It is.
Is that the same journal entry that you reviewed?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me what about that journal entry stood out to you in your review?
Would you like for me to read it?
Yes.
So Carly had kept a journal. It looked like it began in January of 2024, just after after she'd been found by her mother to have been engaging in these behaviors. She kept the journal through much of January and then dropped off. And then this, as I recall, was the only entry in March. So writing on March 12th, Tuesday, she writes, "I think I had a psychotic break earlier. The whole ordeal was quite silly. I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. Well, I didn't hear them until earlier today, but I only do then. My particular friend and I were practically screaming, bloodthirstily and ravenously. Thank God, physical confrontation was not, and I think it's fruitively, possible. I sound crazy." And then she goes on to say, "I need to get back into the habit of journaling. That think it's good. I haven't quite decided if I'll bring this stupid thing to Mrs. Kirk, her therapist, tomorrow, but I can't decide!" Exclamation mark.
The verdict is read clearly, without extra explanation, and in that instant, it's obvious which reality the jury chose. And honestly, good. lock the door, and throw away the key. I don't care how old she is. You don't get to execute your mother and then ask for a second chance. The faint smile that started this story disappears. What replaces it isn't a dramatic outburst. It's silence, flat, hollow silence, the kind where there are no more versions left. Carly stands and listens to the decision that sets the direction of her future. There's no feeling of victory in the room, no real feeling of triumph, just the heavy understanding that tragedies don't come with satisfying endings. Court can place a period at the end of a case, but the human story doesn't stop.
There's a page back there that says, "What do I believe?" There's no God, heaven and hell are false. You writing your own destiny. And these two stand out to me, ladies and gentlemen. She told us what her intent was. You don't need family, and it's okay to be evil.
2 minutes, man.
There's another one I want you to look at. Dr. Pickett talked about it. She wrote, water, fire, earth. Water, fire, earth. She circles fire, ladies and gentlemen, and she wrote, these are Carly Gregg's own words. Miss Todd stated when we got started the other day, what's better, watching a video of what happened or hearing somebody talk about it? Well, I submit to you, we have all of the above in this case. We got to, unfortunately, watch a video of what happened. We've seen photos of what happened. We have audio of what happened. We have the defendant's journals and text messages telling us what happened. She says, I choose fire. It is powerful, beautiful, and deadly. These are the traits I desire, so I choose fire. Ladies and gentlemen, that lady right there chose fire. She chose to murder her mother, tried to kill her stepdad, and then tried to cover it up. We ask that when you go back to the jury room, that you'll look at all the evidence, that you'll consider the testimony that you've heard, that you will not be misled or confused by the fact that the defendant tries to put a burden on the state that does not exist. We do not have to prove the why. We will likely never know the why, but we know that Carly Gregg is guilty of murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence, and we ask you to find the same.
Formally, the case ends, but its consequences live on outside the courtroom. It hurts Ashley's family, who lost someone and can't get anything back from a verdict except a legal confirmation of what happened. It hurts people who look at Carly and still see a child, because 14 is an age where, just yesterday, you're doing homework, and today you're at the center of a criminal trial with life-altering consequences. And it hurts the system, too, because cases like this leave questions nobody can answer cleanly. Were there signals that could have been caught earlier? Are there real tools to protect families when a crisis is forming? And what do you do with the reality where danger sometimes lives in places people are used to calling ordinary life? That's why the story of Carly Gregg doesn't sit in the public mind as only a court precedent. It becomes a reminder that behind every criminal file is a human fate you can't reduce to a single word or a single explanation. Because even when the legal system finishes its work, people still have to live with the shadow of that day, with the quiet after it, and with the uncomfortable truth that in stories like this, the scariest part is often not the loud moment. It's how normal it looked at the start. This story shows us that the scariest thing isn't always the violence itself, but the silence that comes after, when a person can look at what they destroyed and feel absolutely nothing. And that is exactly when a human soul disappears, and only the empty shell remains. Now, tell us honestly, do you believe a 14-year-old can plan an execution like this and still claim it was a mental break? Or is that just a convenient lie to escape justice? What angered you more here? The betrayal of the mother who only wanted to help, or the cold calculation of luring the stepfather into an ambush? If this was your child, would you be able to see them as a victim, or would you only see a monster? Do you have similar stories? Share them in the comments. Let's talk about this together. If this story touched you, you subscribe so you don't miss the next case, which will shock you even more. May Ashley Smiley rest in peace. The Bible says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." And this story proves it. Take this as a warning. Never let resentment fester in the dark, because when you choose violence over words, there is no turning back. Now look at the screen. you see the next videos we prepared for you, believe me, we worked just as hard on them, and if this case shocked you, the next one will surpass everything you've seen. So we don't say goodbye. May God bless you, and see you there.